programme includes graphic descriptions of violence and scenes of the horrific aftermath.
We are part of Great Britain, the most loyal part of Great Britain.
Did you actually kill him? Did you stab him?
I did indeed, yes.
He was stabbed 30 times?
Absolutely.
His throat slit from side to side?
Well, it certainly was barbaric.
John White's victims were Senator Paddy Wilson, a Catholic, and Irene Andrews, a Protestant. They were murdered in a savage attack. White served a life sentence. He was a member of a group of Loyalist killers known as the Ulster Freedom Fighters, the UFF.
The thinking at that particular time was that we would take the war to the IRA.
But he wasn't the IRA.
You know, well, you know...
The woman he was with was a Protestant.
Yes, it was seen as part of the Pan-Nationalist Front. It was seen that he was supporting United Ireland, which the IRA was murdering people in order to bring about. So it was, from our point of view, it was seen as legitimate.
John White walked into Downing Street almost 25 years later with a delegation representing the Loyalist paramilitaries. They'd come to talk peace with Prime Minister John Major.
I certainly felt very proud that I was going there to represent the Loyalist community.
Did you shake hands with John Major?
I did indeed, yes.
When you saw your father's killer, John White, walking into Downing Street?
Oh, I just... flabbergasted, astonished, completely astonished. How a man can do a double murder, because it was a double murder. There was someone with my father, it just wasn't my father. Irene Andrews was with him. And then walk in and meet the Prime Minister of Great Britain was just unbelievable.
And shake his hand?
Yeah, and shake his hand. Which hand did he shake? Was it the hand with the knife? Which hand did he shake?
For almost 30 years, the UVF, the Ulster Volunteer Force, and the other Loyalist paramilitaries have waded through blood before finally calling a ceasefire and opting for peace. However mindless their violence may seem, in their eyes they were defending Ulster from the IRA. As the UVF honour their dead, the threat, they believe, has not gone away.
In the past we have defended your liberty from the onslaught of violent nationalism. Today we may have to do so again against those who have attacked our people.
The UVF and the other paramilitary group, the UDA, spring from a section of the Loyalist community of which both are a part. Together they've slaughtered almost 1,000 people, most of them Catholics who played no part in the conflict. The Ulster Volunteer Force is the oldest of the Loyalist paramilitaries. Its leader in the early days was Gusty Spence. He was filmed in 1972 whilst on the run from jail. Spence is a Loyalist legend, the first godfather of Loyalist violence.
You've got guns.
Yes.
And you're prepared to use them.
True.
And you have used them?
Yes.
When?
On various occasions.
Against?
Against anyone who would usurp the Constitution of Ulster.
Spence's violent past began in 1965 when he was secretly sworn into the UVF in the depths of rural Ulster. As ever, the enemy was the IRA.
There were 4 of us, and we were transported to Pomeroy, place outside Pomeroy.
There was a barn, there was bales of hay and all the rest of it. And there was hurricane lamps. I was tickled pink to be sworn in, that someone would have chosen me to become a member of the Ulster Volunteer Force. It was a sense of, if you had been an Ulster Volunteer, the old Ulster Volunteer, you were for the cause, you know, and you would fight and die. Yes, fight and die, yeah, for the cause.
The cause was defending Protestant Ulster from its Roman Catholic enemies, as the original UVF had been set up to do in 1913. Its leader then was Sir Edward Carson, who led Loyalist resistance to Britain's policy of giving Ireland home rule, a form of semi-independence. The UVF was Carson's private army, 100,000 strong. All its members had signed a covenant, a pledge to defend Ulster.
I just went down with the crowd, and there was one of the men met me at the door. Of course, the police was out regulating the place. Of course, the call went out all over Ulster. And they told you, this is a covenant you're signing to fight for our Ulster. Signed it, they opened the door and showed us out again.
The UVF of today believes it has fought the same battle, to keep Northern Ireland within the United Kingdom and confound the IRA and nationalists whose goal is a united Ireland. But Carson's UVF soon found themselves confronting a different enemy. When war broke out in 1914, Home Rule was postponed, and Ulstermen volunteered to fight for king and country. In 1916, the Ulster Volunteers were thrown against enemy lines at the Somme. The West Belfast Battalion, known as the Shankill Boys, had 700 men. Only 70 came back.
The Battle of the Somme was a terrible battle. Lives lost. And it's hard to describe. I lived with chums. Plenty of them. But you could do nothing about it.
Something like 5,200 casualties. The whole province was plunged into mourning, and I mean really plunged into mourning.
Aye, right!
We were born and reared with that particular story, the sacrifice of the Somme. Surely Britain wouldn't do anything that would be against the Constitution of Northern Ireland because of the sacrifice of the Somme.
The Great War was followed by war in Ireland as British forces hunted down the IRA. In 1921, a treaty was signed, a compromise to buy off Loyalist resistance. The island was divided with a border between Ulster, which remained British, and the new Irish Free State. The royal blessing was given to the new province of Northern Ireland, whose border had been artificially drawn to guarantee a Protestant majority. It had its own police force, the RUC, backed by armed auxiliaries, the B Specials, to counter the IRA. Today, the statue of Sir Edward Carson still stands as a symbol of Ulster's defiance, outside the Stormont Parliament that for half a century was the symbol of Protestant supremacy. From its birth, Northern Ireland was a state under siege. Within its borders was a minority Catholic community, citizens of a state to which most had no wish to belong. side was a doubling government, constitutionally pledged to take it over. Laying siege to the state from without and within was the IRA, determined to destroy it with bloodshed and violence. Loyalists feared the IRA was going to rise again, as it had done in 1916, as thousands of nationalists marched through Belfast. It was the 50th anniversary of the Easter Rising, when rebels proclaimed Ireland's independence. Their leaders were executed. Loyalist fears were intensified by intelligence reports that the IRA was gearing up again.
We had no reason to disbelieve what we were being told.
You did believe at that time
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely.
the IRA were a threat?
Oh, absolutely, yes. Completely.
A month after the Easter commemoration, the UVF issued a chilling declaration. From this day, we declare war against the IRA. Known IRA men will be executed mercilessly and without hesitation.
Did you agree with that statement?
Well, at that time, yes. Oh, absolutely, yes.
Executed mercilessly and without hesitation?
Yes.
A month later, 4 young barmen from a Belfast hotel felt like a late-night drink after work. They went off to a pub off the Protestant Shankill Road. Whilst having a drink, one of them, 18-year-old Peter Ward, was heard to mention he was from the Catholic Falls Road. Peter and his friends then left the bar by the side door.
We come out that door there, and I remember somebody making a command, and all of a sudden shooting started. There was a lot of flashes. The man in front of me was shot. He fell down right away, who was Peter Ward. I was next, so I got the full blast of the shooting. So I remember these people over the top of me, and after a while I looked on, I was dead. Shooting stopped. Everything went very silent.
And Peter?
Peter Ward was taken on the same ambulance as me. According to the pathologist at the time, Peter was dead before he hit the ground.
They shot at Peter, and Peter fell. Well, my Peter was shot, and it was UVF shot him, and he was shot for nothing. He was shot because he was a Roman Catholic.
Gusty Spence was convicted of the murder of Peter Ward and sentenced to life imprisonment. To this day, Spence maintains his innocence.
Well, it has been a heartbreak. It has been a heartbreak. Right, I'm a woman. I never go anywhere, and I never look to go anywhere because Peter's always there.
In 1966, the looming trouble seemed a world away to both communities. Murder was the exception, not the rule. The province had the lowest crime rate in the United Kingdom. Although Catholics and Protestants tended to live in their own areas, overt sectarianism was rare.
My parents always seen what you had to do what you're told. You were taught manners, you were taught how to behave yourself when you went visiting anybody else's home. You were taught to respect other communities. There was no sectarian attitudes from our family in particular.
Andy Tyrrell joined the Ulster Defence Association, the UDA, and went on to become its supreme commander.
Someone didn't fly over Northern Ireland and drop some sort of loony gas. And suddenly people woke up one morning as killers. We didn't go to bed one night as ordinary family men and woke up the next morning as killers. Conditions were created in this country whereby people done things they shouldn't have done.
Billy Mitchell was later sentenced to life for a double murder. By the mid-60s, a fiery young Protestant preacher had emerged called Ian Paisley. The sectarian genie was out of the bottle.
Romanism has controlled in this land for many centuries, and Romanism has bred poverty and ignorance and priestcraft and superstition. Thank God for the liberty of the gospel.
There was power with Paisley. There was power in his mannerisms. There was power in his preaching. Something that got them right to the bottom of my heart. And this is a man that's going places. This is a man that's doing the Lord's work. And if he's going to do the Lord's work, then I'm going to do it with him. And I would in those days, I would have done anything for Paisley. I've seen him as a great Ulster man, and like a lot of others, a second Carson.
Paisley saw the growing rapprochement between the Stormont government and Dublin as treachery, a betrayal of the Protestant faith and a betrayal of Protestant Ulster.
I wasn't like some person standing alone with a voice of one crying in the wilderness. I was voicing the strong resentment of the Ulster people.
Paisley was now bolstered by his own organisation, drawn from his own supporters, known as the Ulster Protestant Volunteers. One of the architects of the UPV had his own plans for it.
My idea was to have this made up mainly of specials, ex-former specials, that at a snap of a finger, a secret code word, we could have had a private army, just like Carson did.
To the young Noel Doherty, if the UPV was to defend Ulster, it needed arms.
We needed shotguns, Sten guns, revolvers, explosives. I mean, we just needed the paraphernalia of weaponry.
Doherty was sentenced to 2 years for possession of explosives. Paisley disowned him and insisted he knew nothing of what he was doing. Nationalists took to the streets to demand civil rights. They'd had enough of being treated as second-class citizens. John Hume led from the front. The civil rights movement demanded equality and an end to discrimination. The Stormont government saw it as a direct challenge to its authority and had no doubt who was behind it.
Well, to me it was the beginning of a Republican campaign organised entirely by the IRA, and it was much more significant than any previous campaign. It was a deliberate effort by the IRA to play a bigger part in the politics of Northern Ireland and the Irish Republic.
It was seen by myself and fellow Unionists as a new means of overthrowing Northern Ireland and absorbing Northern Ireland into a united Ireland. It was seen as a nationalist plot to overthrow the state.
Given the determination of the Stormont government to resist and the defiance of the marchers, violence was inevitable. When Bill Craig banned a march in Londonderry, the order was ignored. The mainly Protestant police took out their own anger and frustration.
It was seen as a nationalist plot to overthrow the state.
Given the determination of the Stormont government to resist and the defiance of the marchers, violence was inevitable. When Bill Craig banned a march in Londonderry, the order was ignored. The mainly Protestant police took out their own anger and frustration.
How did you react to the scenes of policemen beating demonstrators over the head?
Well, few that got the attention of the media, I didn't see anything wrong with it.
You didn't see anything wrong with policemen batoning marchers?
Not people who were involved in violence. They weren't marching.
Craig paid the penalty for his hard line when he was sacked from the cabinet by Stormont's Liberal Prime Minister, Captain Terence O'Neill.
I think that's a mistake that was made all around at that time, was a willingness to appease violence.
Paisley shared Craig's view and challenged O'Neill, who'd called a general election, hoping for a vote of confidence. Paisley ran against him.
My friends, we are in the midst of a great crisis in our Ulster province, and the marching feet of the Protestants today cause the Twitter to tremble.
Paisley almost unseated O'Neill with the help of his supporters and the UPV. They now believed they had O'Neill on the run. But some members of the UPV took more drastic action to undermine O'Neill. Aided by some off-duty B specials, they ambushed civil rights marchers just outside Derry. A government inquiry laid the blame firmly at the door of Ian Paisley and his Ulster Protestant volunteers. But some of Paisley's followers went even further and became involved in terrorist activity. A series of explosions sabotaged Belfast's water supply. They were thought to be the work of the IRA, but they were not.
Who was behind those explosions?
It was a conglomerate. There were UVF men involved, and there were members of the UPV involved.
What was the point of hitting those targets?
To erode confidence in O'Neill, bring O'Neill's government down.
The strategy worked. O'Neill resigned. One of Paisley's followers was sentenced to 12 years for causing the explosions. He was a member of the UPV. A few months later, there was an explosion at a power station across the border. One of the bombers, Thomas MacDowell, was killed in the process, electrocuted by 5,000 volts. MacDowell was a member of Paisley's church and Paisley's UPV.
Here are people closely connected with you and your organisation who are involved in terrorist activity.
Yes, it is. Closely involved with me. I don't know whether you can say that or not, but they were in organisations that I was leading. That is right. But I mean, I can't be responsible for everybody who is a member of a church that I pastor or an organisation which I lead.
The atmosphere was charged. There was pressure to ban the Protestant parade in Londonderry, held every year by the apprentice boys to commemorate the epic siege. But despite the protests, the parade went ahead. Nationalists stoned the marchers and then the police. The RUC were ill-equipped to cope with a full-scale riot.
What I saw was an insurrection. I saw groups of people defying law and order, trying to destroy Northern Ireland, and the police were the bulwark against them. You know, I felt these people are trying to destroy Northern Ireland. They are marching for rights that I don't have. They're saying that I'm preventing them from getting the rights. And now they're trying to destroy the country.
Northern Ireland had never witnessed scenes like this before. The days of peaceful protest were gone.
The police were in a very bad way. There were less than 3,000 police in those days. They'd been fighting, or whatever you like to call it, for people for 3 or 4 days. They needed sleep, they needed everything. And that was why we called in the troops. I rang up Jim Callahan, who was the Home Secretary, and said that we felt we needed help. We needed some troops.
The rioting spread to Belfast as nationalists attacked the police to take the pressure off their comrades in Derry. Fearing their community was under attack, Loyalists prepared for the worst.
Rumours spread, and rumours spread very quickly, and people were under the impression that the Protestant areas of the Shankill had been attacked on the Wednesday night, that was a deliberate attack, and that more was to follow.
I can remember standing on the corner of Dover Street watching the tracer bullets flying up the street, feeling totally terrified. My mother pulling me in.
Protestant families as well as Catholics became refugees in their own city. The Shankill prepared to fight back.
I remember Protestants at that time making petrol bombs, etc., getting ready for an attack that they believed would come on a Thursday night from the falls.
William Smith joined the Red Hand Commando and was sentenced to 10 years for attempted murder.
How did you make a petrol bomb? How did we make it? Put in a level of sugar, petrol, put in soak the rag and petrol and tied it around the top of the bottle. Had you ever done that kind of thing before? Not prior to that, no. I mean, that was the first time.
Eddie Kinner later joined the UVF and served a life sentence for murder. Protestants now petrol-bombed Catholic areas. To Catholics, this was a Loyalist pogrom. To Protestants, it was retaliation.
What effect did August 1969 have on the Protestant community?
Well, I think it was a shattering blow for the Protestant community, in that they believed that no matter what happened, that the state would protect them, and they felt let down by the state.
Protestants were even more incensed when the government announced that the police would be disarmed and their beloved B Specials disbanded. Loyalists now felt defenceless, confirming their growing fear that Westminster was preparing to abandon them.
Loyalists felt very angry that their special force had been disbanded. Why were feelings so intense?
Well, I think they were very intense because the B Specials were very well thought of. And, I mean, I myself would say that they were really, on the whole, a pretty good lot.
That night, fierce rioting broke out on the Shankill Road as Loyalists vented their anger. The army moved in to help the police. In the confrontation, a Loyalist was killed by the army and a policeman shot dead by the UVF. What price loyalty now?
It was very confusing for me and for Unionist people generally to see a member of the Royal Ulster Constabulary killed by Protestants. But it did reflect the irritation and the anger of the Unionist people in Northern Ireland at the loss of the B Specialists, because they became scared that there was going to be a further diminution of the union between Great Britain and Northern Ireland.
As the IRA started bombing Protestant targets, the UVF hit back with unprecedented violence. It planted a bomb in McGurk's Bar in the centre of Belfast. There was no warning. 15 people were killed. All were Catholics. Among the victims were the owner's wife and his 14-year-old daughter, Mari.
As in the bar pulling the and the bar went up in the air, just collapsed around me. And I was buried underneath where I was standing. And just amid the rubble and glass were, and I was just, I said to myself, what have I done to suffer this?
A stark memorial. One bomb, 15 funerals. Belfast had never seen the like before and has never seen it since.
Why did the UVF bomb McGurk's bar and kill 15 innocent Catholics?
Probably because someone told them, or they felt that the IRA were using McGurk's bar. Rightly or wrongly, no. But that's the way things were in those days. Someone says, the Provost are using such and such a place, okay, let's touch for it.
Did your bar have any Republican connections?
No, we had no.
Any IRA connections?
None whatever.
Do you think about it still?
Aye, well, of course, that is one thing you do. It does come into your mind periodically, you know. But, of course, then you see you have to control it because, you know, you're keeping it in your mind because you only start getting vindictive then and that not serve any useful purpose.
The driver of the bomber's car was arrested and given life. The bombers themselves were never caught. A week later, the IRA retaliated and bombed a furniture shop on the Shankill Road. The UVF had given no warning, nor did the IRA. It was now a horrendous cycle of tit for tat.
I mean, I would have been a youngster then, a teenager, and the adults were covering up any of the damage and leaving us, saying to us to lift the rubble off different areas, and it was obvious that they were keeping us away from seeing any of those, particularly the baby in the pram.
What happened to the baby in the pram?
It was killed outright.
Did you see the baby's bodies?
Seen them, yes. Yes. They had them, I didn't actually see the bodies, they had them wrapped in sheets, but the blood was just coming right through. I mean, it was just like lumps of meat, you know, small lumps of meat. I just stood there and cried, to be honest with you. Just totally and utterly numb. Just very emotional, and just come to a realisation then that this wasn't a game, this isn't a game. This is a war going on here. These people are trying to do us all in, they're trying to kill us all. And I don't care who we are or what age we are, but because we're Protestants, they're going to kill us, so we're going to have to do something here.
Billy McQuiston joined the UDA and was later sentenced to 8 years for armed robbery.
My mentality then would have been, whenever they blew up a location in the Shankill, killing 1 or 2 people, I would want to double that. I mean, I would want to blow up somewhere in the Falls, killing double the amount, doing twice the amount of damage that they would do in my community.
By the beginning of 1972, Loyalists felt increasingly alone, convinced they were the victims of IRA genocide. Desperately, they looked for leadership. Around 60,000 Protestants thought they had found it as they united under the standard of Ulster Vanguard. To the vast crowd, the days of Carson were back. Cometh the hour, cometh the man, and Vanguard's Carson was Bill Craig.
Why did you join Vanguard?
Vanguard in those days was Bill Craig. And Bill Craig, I must say, personally was enormously influential on me. He seemed to me to be the only major figure in unionism that had any coherent thought or analysis of the situation.
Craig didn't mince his words.
There can be no compromise or concession to the enemy that assails our province today. We must build up the dossiers on the men and women who are a menace to this Because one day, ladies and gentlemen, if the politicians fail, it may be our job to liquidate the enemy.
In your speech at that rally, you talked of liquidating the enemy. Why did you say that? Why did you use those words?
Because I did mean to liquidate the enemy.
Literally?
Well, not in terms of personalities, but in terms of organization, yes.
Did you realize what you were saying when you spoke of liquidating the enemy?
Yes.
Did you think of how those words might be interpreted?
No, I didn't expect them to be interpreted any other way than the normal meaning.
What did you think of his words about liquidating the enemy when you heard them?
A bit over the top. Similarly, he made a speech here at Westminster, which was a bit over the top as well. These things occasionally happen.
I thought, well, he was being honest in the sense where he felt, well, that was the only way to deal with the enemy. Now, and he didn't mean democratic nationalists. He meant violent nationalists. He meant the people who were involved in the bombing and the shooting and the bombing and the petrol bombing. He meant that to liquidate those people would have prevented the trouble carrying on the length of time it did carry on.
Did you agree with that sentiment, liquidating the enemy?
I never seen any different. I always felt the only way to beat terrorism was to terrorize the terrorists and be better at it.
Bill Craig wasn't the only politician whipping up emotions as the IRA continued its slaughter. Around this time, Ian Paisley was up there too, thundering the Loyalist battle cries that had echoed down the years.
Let it go out that we're cool, determined Loyalists who will never surrender, and who are...
Many young Loyalists believed their politicians were giving them the green light to hit back against the IRA.
Well, we all have to take our responsibility for this, and not least the politicians. They were only too happy to lead us by the nose at one stage. Get into them, boys. Protestant, Ulster, we will fight and we will die. Well, they never fought, they never died. It was left to people like me.
Bobby Morton joined the UVF and was later sentenced to 15 years for attempted murder. Many of those who became involved in the Loyalist paramilitary organizations in the early 1970s say that they did so because of what you said, the language that you used, the emotions that you stirred. Do you accept responsibility for it?
No, I do not indeed. And these are the same people that have the worst word in their belly for me today. So I don't accept that at all. That is a slander.
Paisley's hero, Sir Edward Carson, had mustered his men in the face of what he saw as treachery and betrayal by Westminster. When the British government abolished the storm at Parliament, Loyalists felt that history was repeating itself. Tens of thousands flocked to hear the defiance of their leaders. One of those on the balcony was John Taylor.
It was a scene of a people who were increasingly alarmed that one thing after another they were losing power in their own country. They had lost their be specials and now they were losing their parliament, and they just felt that they were on the slippery road towards eventual unity in Ireland.
Sergeant Major, you'll take number 2 patrol tonight. Second Lieutenant, you'll take number 1.
With Stormont abolished, a Loyalist army with military ranks and sunglasses suddenly emerged from the shadows. It was called the Ulster Defence Association, the UDA. The UDA's original purpose, as its name suggests, was defence, but from the outset, defence was a potentially violent business. One evening, I watched masked men with cudgels hijack vehicles on the Shankill Road. They were then taken to another Loyalist area to set up barricades. I was surprised at the local reaction.
Have you any idea who these people are?
No, I don't.
You frightened?
No, I'm not indeed. I'm glad to see them round here.
Why?
Because I am. I think it's about time our one started to do something.
Well, we had been part of a vigilante system, armed with cudgels and baseball bats, guarding our own area, our own housing estate. This was reflected widely in all Loyalist areas of Belfast. And I thought at that time, well, here's a bit of authority coming on the scene. And we were promised there'd be guns and all for our protection. For, I mean, you can't use a baseball bat against a gun. And I fell for the pitch. I thought it was pretty good.
And the guns came in, the promises were kept?
Oh, yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
The IRA onslaught continued, culminating in a murderous blitz on Belfast city centre. 26 bombs in just over an hour. The warnings were inadequate. The day became known as Bloody Friday. 11 people died, 130 were injured. For many young Loyalists, Bloody Friday changed everything.
That was a turning point, I think, for me. I had avoided joining paramilitary organisations to that point. I was in an upstairs pub lounge which had a reasonable view across Belfast, and I watched as the puffs of smoke went up. And it was only later, of course, that you realised that each of the puffs of smoke was somebody's life. And I got off the fence and probably naively felt that the best means of defence was attack. I joined the Ulster Volunteer Force and quickly began to do what I believed was right and challenge the threat to my society.
I do remember the bombs going off. Everybody in Belfast heard them. And I think we all remember the images on the television of people literally scooping bodies off the street with shovels. It was a horrible, horrible time. But at that moment in time, if someone had have said to me, place a bomb in some part of the Catholic community, then it is quite possible that I would have did that.
What were your emotions on the day of Bloody Friday?
I don't think they were rational. I would be telling lies, and I'm somewhat shamed by saying that they weren't rational. I think I could have countenanced anything, and probably did.
What did you want to do?
Hit back. Hit back.
David Irvine joined the UVF. He was sentenced to 11 years for possession of explosives. In the wake of such carnage, hundreds of young Loyalists rushed to join the paramilitaries, and not just in Belfast. The UVF in Mid-Ulster was inundated with recruits, schooled in the use of homemade guns.
And one burst, if you wish. But when you're firing, you're firing short bursts, short, sharp bursts. And you can judge it by squeezing the trigger. Squeeze, 1, 2, release. Squeeze, 1, 2, release. That gives you a burst of 3 or 4 rounds at a time. And the quantity and the numbers that are not...
There was a table with the flag on it and a gun and 2 masked men stood on each side of it and a masked man behind it. And the sworn men read the oath to me. I knew that when I was taking this oath that I wasn't getting involved in the Boy Scouts. I knew that to join UFS I was going to have to carry out shootings, bombings, whatever our activity involved with that organisation.
Killings?
And killings.
Did you have no hesitation about the prospect of taking part in killing people?
No.
Were you prepared to kill?
Without question.
You knew what you were letting yourself into?
Without question.
With your eyes wide open?
Totally. My decision. And made by me, and me alone.
It made me feel 6 foot tall. Give you some power. You had a lot of power when you had that gun in your home.
You had the power to?
Nobody's going to stand in the way.
Power of life and death?
Power of life and death.
John Dillon joined the UVF and served a life sentence for murder. As the IRA continued destroying property and lives, the UDA decided to take drastic action. They formed a secret unit to hit back.
You must remember that particular time, the UDA was a very, very large organisation, comprising of almost 30,000 or more members. And it was felt, because of the activities that was being carried out, that it had to be a more streamlined, more efficient, more effective organisation.
This was talked about for some 6 to 9 months before it was agreed that the UDA should actually have a wing within itself that had the capability to go out on the offensive.
A killer wing?
Yeah.
And that became?
The Ulster Freedom Fighters, EFF.
Did you join?
I did, yes.
To Loyalists, the IRA scaled new heights of depravity when a bomb killed 6 Protestant pensioners on an outing in Coleraine. An order went out from the UFF High Command that Catholics were to be killed in retaliation.
What did you do?
I went out with a group of other volunteers from the EFF, and we picked up a Catholic, and we took him away, and we executed him.
Murdered him?
Yeah.
Shot him dead?
Yes.
A Catholic?
Yes.
Any Catholic?
Yes.
Why was he selected?
He was selected for no other reason than he was a Catholic.
No reason to believe he was involved in
No.
the Republican movement?
No.
Just an innocent 17-year-old student?
Yeah.
Who pulled the trigger?
I pulled the trigger.
You pulled the trigger?
I did, yes.
With any hesitation?
No. Sure.